Over the past few months, Above All Laws has brought you true cases and factual information relating to the District Attorney Larry D. Morse II and his family and friends who seem to walk away from a myriad of crimes, including murder, never being held accountable for their crimes and emboldening them to commit more crimes of greater degree upon their victims. During our research, we have uncovered this very telling inside look into how DA Larry Morse thinks, from talking about himself in the third person to being very careful not to say too much. We did catch a few key and telling moments of this interview, which was broadcast on 1480 KYOS on November 29, 2014. We have included a link to the full interview with a couple of hosts that seem to be a bit smitten by our District Attorney Larry D. Morse II. So grab some popcorn and gather around the screen as Above All Laws, the Morse Family Ties brings you Merced County District Attorney Larry D. Morse in his own words, followed by my questions and or response.
My son had not been truthful with me a year and a half earlier because after the shooting, I'd asked him. I knew this was a kid's party, and I'd said, "Hey, you weren't at that party." "Oh, no. And it had come up a couple of times and said, "You weren't at that party," and he said, "No." And I'm like, "Okay, all right." And so we talked about it over the year, and he knew he would have been in trouble for going and all that sort of stuff. So, he candidly did not level with me about having gone to that party.
The district attorney states that his son was not honest with him for a year and a half, and now somehow he is honest and trustworthy? Does the district attorney extend that kind of courtesy to all the accused who lie before the court? Well, Your Honor, I know the accused lied to us last year when questioned about being at the scene of 3 murders, but we believe he's being honest now and telling us the truth about what happened and his affiliations to gang members. For some reason, I don't think that would happen. Let's look at the statement a little closer and ask a few questions. Why does the DA even ask his son if he had attended the party? Did he suspect him of being there? Did Larry ever mention to Ethan when Tellez was first arrested, just after the murders? And why did Larry and Ethan talk about this case numerous times throughout the year?
We're sitting down, my wife and I, that evening. I tell him, hey, they cleared that Atwater case. We talk about the cases occasionally.
The District Attorney Larry D. Morse II just stated that he discusses cases with his wife and children. But when your wife is prohibited by her MDA contract from doing so, and not to mention your wife handles criminal law and family law according to her website, so discussing cases with her could be a major conflict. And the danger in talking about these cases, including witnesses with a son around who may give information to his gang acquaintances, which could further his ranking in the gang. Many questions, but let's go on.
I didn't have to convince Ethan to do this. He voluntarily said, I will go and talk to the detective.
That's right. He came to you.
He just said, I know, Dad. I know I have to talk to him. And Jacob Tellez was not, contrary to what's been reported, a close friend of Ethan's at all. He knew him very casually. He had been brought over to our house that night by a mutual friend. Mm-hmm. And Ethan knew Tellez only slightly, and so they weren't like running buddies.
Right.
Tellez had a gang history.
Right.
The unforgivably stupid thing that my son did was that he knew that Jacob Tellez had a gun when he came over to the house, a .22 caliber.
Right.
And he allowed him to get in the car with 7 other kids in the car. He said, I didn't want to be a wuss and say you can't get in the car if you have a gun. And if he had left the gun at the house, he would have come back to the house, and I didn't want him to spend the night at the house.
Okay, wait a minute. The Merced County District Attorney's son allowed a known gang member into the DA's home and the DA's car, knowing the gang member had a gun, a loaded weapon, and the DA's son did it because he didn't want to be a wuss? Or because he wanted to join Tellez's gang? And another thing, who said it was a .22 caliber weapon that Tellez had? The only people who say it was a .22 caliber weapon are the friends of the gang member Tellez. So why would they say it was a .38 or .357 Tellez had, as this would further implicate themselves in the murder? If we have no reliable witnesses to properly and accurately identify the weapon a gang member had on the night of the murders, why can't we presume it may have been a .38 or .357 caliber weapon and not just a .22 caliber weapon, which the gang members' friends say it was?
Ethan then arranged with the detectives, he contacted the other people who were in the car, and he had them come forward, right, and arranged for them to come in.
So the DA is saying that it took Ethan to arrange for the other witnesses to come forward? Why wouldn't he give the names of the others involved and allow the investigators to contact them directly? Instead, you are telling me the Merced County Sheriff's investigators had Ethan doing their job and possibly tainting witnesses' testimony?
Thursday, like I said, Tellez was arrested, and Friday morning, my wife actually had called me that morning and said, "You don't think Ethan's in trouble?" And I'm like, "No way, he didn't do anything."
Call it a mother's intuition, but she never said, "You don't think they will try to pin this on Ethan, do you?" Instead, she asked if Larry thought Ethan was in trouble. She's a criminal defense attorney, and she knows when someone might be in trouble, but our DA doesn't? The DA nonchalantly blows off the fact that his son was at a crime scene when it happened and that his son brought a known gang member with a loaded firearm to that crime scene.
A week and a half after Ethan is arrested, my youngest son was in Germany with a friend of his. He contacts my wife and says he has been contacted by a friend of his, my youngest, whose mom wants to talk to my wife. This woman comes to see Cindy and tells her that her two oldest kids were at the party, that it wasn't Ethan and it wasn't Jacob Tellez, that wasn't what happened, that her son saw the murders in the backyard, and that he was out in the front yard and watched exactly how this murder unfolded, and that there were a couple of Merced gangsters from a well-known criminal street gang in Merced, one of whom had shot the victim and hit him with in the head, in the neck with a gun, and the other guy who had come up and shot him while he was on his knees.
Okay, so let me understand this better. You're telling me that this witness who had just seen or heard two people get shot to death in the backyard with 3 wounded who are screaming in pain trying to get away, you're telling me this witness of yours just walks right in the front yard and watches as one gang member shot Bernabed in the head or neck, which caused Bernabed to drop to his knees, and then your witness continues to watch as another gang member walks up and shoots Bernabed while he is on his knees? This witness must have nerves of steel, not to mention incredible vision in the country at 11 p.m. at night.
So the other thing that has never been explained, never even a theory offered, is how do you explain who fired the other 438 or 357, they're not sure which caliber they are, shots that killed the victim in this case? There were 2 separate guns.
Actually, that is not true. New witnesses have come forward stating that it was basically the DA's son driving the DA's vehicle when Tellez fired several shots while he extended the gun outside the window at Bernabed as your son yelled, "Shoot, shoot, shoot!" Then the witnesses saw Ethan stop the vehicle, and someone got out, picked up Bernabed's own weapon, which apparently he had dropped after he fell from being shot by Tellez, and saw that person who got out of the DA's car finish Bernabed off with Bernabed's own gun before getting back into the vehicle as the DA's son sped away from the crime scene. That is another explanation that our DA has left out.
16 months later, they come and serve a search warrant at my house. And actually go, I tell them my gun, I have a 38, and it had been at my office. So I said, I haven't had my gun here forever. It's been 2 years or so, and it's been my office. And very quickly determined not to be connected to this at all.
The DA kept a gun in a public building for at least 2 years, which is against the law, and the DA does not have a permit to carry a gun either. So why has he not been charged, and does this not create a conflict of interest in his prosecution of others who may be carrying a weapon without a permit, or if the person is accused of taking a weapon into a public building? Go on.
You have stippling that is inconsistent with a drive-by shooting. You have no explanation for how a second gun is involved in this. They didn't do what's called GSR, gunshot residue testing, on the victim in this case. They had bagged his hands in preparation for doing GSR, but it had never been done until our attorney said, "You're kidding me, this hasn't been done." And he demanded that GSR be done on the victim. It was done by the Department of Justice, and it came back with gunshot residue on both hands, all right, which suggests that he was firing a gun as well. Now, there was another person that was shot that night, Merced gang member, well-known gang member that was shot in the stomach, who was with Samantha, was friends with Samantha.
Okay, so doesn't the fact that the victim had GSR on his hands prove that he had a handgun that night? So where did that gun go? Is it not more consistent that someone picked up and used Bernabed's own weapon to murder him? The same weapon Bernabed pulled out and shot possibly 2 others at the party before running away? And this statement.
Merced gang member, well-known gang member that was shot in the stomach, who was with Samantha, was friends with Samantha.
Yeah, that statement sickens my soul to the core. Our district attorney is going to blame Samantha Pereira for the murders by saying she was with a gang member and brought him to the party, even though his own son brought a well-known gang member who he also knew had a loaded handgun to that party. Press play.
I can say that when you step back and you look at the fact that in 25 years, no one in the legal community can remember a case in which a homicide did not get past a prelim, that suggests that there were some serious problems. And the only explanation is that somehow there were failures on the part of the investigation, or the judge made a mistake.
And you know that is the same thing we have heard from everyone else in the justice system. But where have I heard this before? Oh, that's right. Never had a person who was convicted of a crime been brought back into court within a few months and have 9 years knocked off of their sentence. That's right. Your son had a judge render a decision that was just never heard of before. No appeal, no bringing of evidence to prove that an appeal should go forward, just the judge calling him in and knocking off 9 years off of his sentence. That's right. Your other son had a judge render a decision that was just never heard of before. Seems to be a normal thing to do, the not so normal thing when it comes to the district attorney Larry D. Morse II's kids killing people.
For anyone else. I knew when he said he'd keep the case, I frankly, thought, well, all the judges will disqualify themselves. When he took it, it didn't surprise me, because he's a guy who always has marched to his own tune. He doesn't care what anybody thinks.
Whoa, back that up real quick.
For anyone else. I knew when he...
Right there. Did you hear that? He almost said that Hansen agreed. Did Larry have Hansen agree to take the case? Would that mean that Hansen and Larry met before the case to ensure that Hansen took the case? I'm a bit confused. Actually, there are 3 possible reasons Larry Morris's son, Ethan Morris, and Jacob Tellez got away with murder. The 3rd possible reason, and in my opinion, the most plausible, was that the father of the accused, Merced County District Attorney Larry D. Morris, promised Judge Hansen something that Hansen could not pass up. If Hansen would just ensure that the case can never come back up for trial by making an unheard of factual finding which discourages the pursuit of justice. And I believe we will see that promise come to light once DA Larry Morris is given the opportunity to retire or resign and Larry appoints his successor.
And I don't believe anyone is going to come out and suggest that, Judge Hansen made a mistake. They haven't said that, so that only leaves one other plausible scenario. And if that is in fact the case, then there ought to be some, in my view, there ought to be some further inquiry to see what happened.
Now this is where we can both agree. If there was any person involved in this case who may have attempted to sway witnesses' testimony or intimidate witnesses to keep investigators from the truth, that person and their actions deserve additional inquiry. And I think Larry knows exactly what I'm talking about.
My kids always say, we live in the hood, Dad. I'm like, no, we don't. We live in a great neighborhood.
Very nice.
If only Larry would have listened to his own kids and moved into an area where his kids didn't have easy access to gangs, drugs, and other activity, just maybe, 2 people would be alive today. Alexander Ruiz and Bernabé Hernandez Canela. For Above All Laws, I'm Matthew Gonzalez.
Ironically, my son was a victim of what hadn't been done in the sheriff's department. You know that I complained bitterly for a lot of years about the fact that the sheriff's department had no gang operations.
You not only complained bitterly, but you went and spoke before the board of supervisors and you ruffled some feathers.
I did.
And I'm wondering, does this have something to do with that?